All right, and I'm rearranging the flags again, reclassifying them, mainly by regions of the world or continents or maybe a certain cultural diaspora. And my next mail pickup from the forwarding service, I got four more historical U.S. flags coming from the stars, the 26, 27 stars, 28 stars, and 29 stars, and then further down the road I'll be in the 30s. And I also got another batch of former Soviet Central Asia, the little nations within that part of the world, and that's pretty unique. And I got a thing for the former Soviet Union, no joke. And that's why I practice Russian. But that aside, I'm doing the Baltic nation flags. Not Baltic, Balkan. I keep getting those confused. Balkans from southern Eastern Europe. And this one is Albania. I think it looks very majestic. And that black eagle design, or double-headed eagle design, is also common on other Slavic nations' crests and flags, especially the Duma in the Russian Federation. And what can I tell you about Albania? During the Cold War, they were the North Korea of Eastern Europe. I mean, very strict, very tight, very totalitarian. If you were caught with the Bible, you would be executed or 20 years in prison, because the dictator at the time, he had a very strict policy of atheism, and all school kids had to go to the Atheist Museum. And now it's a relatively loved vacation area, but at that point in time it was very tight. Foreigners in general were not welcome. And even to this day, if you were to visit Tirana, Albania, or any of the towns, especially the cities, there are a lot of little bunkers, and people like to go in and just walk in and out of the bunkers because they were preparing for an invasion. Of course, militarism. You're paranoid about the enemy from outside trying to come in and be mean to everybody. History has we've known it through the world. All right, and what else can I say? They were the only continental European country to be militarily aligned to China. And Albanian school children from that point of time, up and through the early 90s when they just shook that regime off, they were learning Chinese in school as part of their mandatory curriculum. Yeah, so that's an anomaly as far as the history of European alliances. So they were briefly under Yugoslavia with Tito, but they broke away and asserted their own sovereignty. Albanians, historically, they've been religiously Muslim, but a lot of Albania has been becoming Christian now. If anyone wants to correct me or fill me in more on the scoop, please do. And that's why I like to express myself on this channel. Again, bullying or anything that's really, insulting or condescending, you're gone. I'll delete you. Everyone else, hey, you're more than welcome. Like I said, if I was Batman rich, I would go all over Eastern Europe. I'd go all over Albania and the Balkans. And I got a lot to say. That's why I'm going to break this in two parts. So I'm going to go on the more older part of Balkan history, at least within the context of the 20th century. And, of course, Albania has a bad stereotype for exporting criminality to the UK and Western Europe, but I'm not going to say, all Albanians are criminals. But unfortunately, there's predatory people everywhere, and any opportunities are, they'll jump on that train fast. Just like And that happened with a lot of Eastern European countries. When the Iron Curtain fell, a lot of these gypsies and such were, going westward, to ply their trade or their criminal skills. Again, I'm not saying all Roma people or all gypsies are criminals. I'm just it's a little, it's one of the bad sides of Europe. And, Europe has been a part of my life since childhood. And, I love geography since I was little. And this is a country I remember growing up. And, by the time I was, my high school years, it started coming apart. But they were a relatively stable country during the Iron Curtain era, when they had the very stern east-west divide. So this is Yugoslavia, founded by Tito. And Yugo is south or southern, so he wanted all these southern Slavs united under one roof. And you'll see in the next video when I show you the Balkan nations flags, and those are all the countries that were once under this political entity. And then, the Civil War came when I was just a couple years away from finishing high school. And, Europe was changing. When my coming of age, post-Cold War Europe, was really changing everything. There wasn't that rigid, this the good side, that's the commie side. I mean, it was changing. And, the Iron Curtain fell and the USSR fell. There was no more USSR when I, came back to Europe after graduation. And, but Yugoslavia was like Soviet light. They were officially, they say socialist, but I still consider it communist. But Tito did assert his sovereignty of Yugoslavia. He didn't want to be a satellite of the Soviet Union or, just strictly adhere to their sphere of influence. And he did have relatively good relations with the West. They had a good industry. It wasn't utopia, but people under Yugoslavia lived relatively well. Definitely better than a lot of Soviets. I give them that. And so the Red Star is very common in communist iconography. I did watch a badly dubbed Yugoslavian war movie. Even, it was kind of, the production wasn't to write home about, but it was nice to see a window into, that part of the world and that history and, that ideological mindset. It's, I think it was on a late night show. And again, I didn't know the difference between Kosovo and Bosnia, or what a Serbian was, or, Montenegro. I was still very ignorant about the differences in the different republics, and now independent nations, which you'll see in the next video. Again, really nice looking flag. And usually people that I talk to that, they were born in Yugoslavia before it fell apart, or are a lot older. They grew up in Yugoslavia, what was then Yugoslavia. Yeah, that they usually have positive, memories as far as I can tell. Not somebody that was in occupied Poland or what have you. Yep. There's another YouTube channel I like, and I forgot what it's called, but they show like what TV was like in these particular countries, whether they exist or not, during the Cold War era, and that's pretty interesting. So it's a little window in. They have one about Yugoslavian TV, throughout the ages before it crumbled apart. So that was a big thing about, when I was in my senior year, and then when I went back to Germany for the first time in 5 years, and the Netherlands, Europe was changing. The whole all the the Iron Curtain countries were still relatively poor and underdeveloped compared to Western Europe, but it's not like that now. I mean, the Czech Republic is like Paris of Central Europe. Poland is an awesome place to visit now. So is Hungary. They've definitely come a long way. They've arrived in that metaphorical sense. Even this area that was in the midst of a horrible war 30 years ago, now it's a nice area, except it's not Yugoslavia anymore. But in the 80s, when I was in Germany, a lot of my German friends that I knew from school and the American kids from the Dodd school system, yeah, they'd go with their families in vacation in Yugoslavia back then. And that was, again, that was relatively a safer country for people from, the Yankee West. If you were a soldier in the 80s and you wanted to take your family to Moscow, yeah, they wouldn't really go for that, especially if you had a secret clearance. But yeah, Yugoslavia, again, it was a world of its own, a big chunk of Europe. It was a nice sized country. Okay, and I forgot the Yugo. If you're old enough to remember, or you know the history of U.S. consumer culture, they made the Yugo, and a lot of people made fun of it, but it was relatively a good selling car at the time because it was so cheap. If you're a college student pinching pennies, or you're a teenager and you just need a thing to get around, now that was pretty much, for the 80s economy, your budget. So what can I say? And also they were kind of militaristic, and Yugoslavia fell apart like about 10 years after Tito passed away. He passed away in 1980. He was the glue that held them together. So over a period of 10 plus years, it just started unraveling because other parts of the nation at that time were complaining about, not getting what was due to them and so forth. Or more emphasis was on Serbia being taken care of than, Slovenia or Montenegro. But there's plenty of YouTube channels that can explain that better than me. But again, I'm a fan of history, military regalia, and so I like collecting these things. So there it is, Yugoslavia. And the next video, I'm going to show you the flags of all the Balkan nations that used to consist of this one entity. Over and out. Thanks for watching.